Hello everyone and welcome back to RCH Builders. We're trying something a little bit different today with this addition that we're working on. With it being for an actual customer, we don't have as much time to be able to talk to the camera. There's still some footage where we'll be able to do that here and there, but for the most part, most of this is probably going to end up having to be done this way, where I try to do a voiceover type deal. Never done it before, so hopefully this will work out just fine. So one of the first things that we're going to do when we get started here is we got to try to see if either end of the 6x6 is square. It is come from the factory or the store, of course, is where we actually get it from. Home Depot is where we purchased these ones, but when they come even straight from the factory, a lot of times they will not have a square end. Sometimes they do, but in this case they did not. So I was having to sit here and square up one end before I could even measure the other. So I tried to see first. If you're doing this with a regular saw, you will need to make that square line go all the way around a 6x6. And then you'll have to cut all four sides, and then you'll still have to use a Sawzall to cut through like the last 2 inches of the center. It's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of the center that the saw just cannot reach. However, we have a extremely large timber saw that is made by a skill saw. And you see right here, that's how small a regular saw is in comparison to this saw. It is definitely a little bit heavy. It's actually quite surprising how little kickback such a large saw like this has. It does not have... doesn't feel, when I use it anyways, it does not seem to have quite as much weight and kickback to it as you would think for such a large saw. So last time we used it, I think we were cutting up against a building and we had adjusted it. I didn't realize that. I had forgot about that. So I had to, that's why it didn't cut all the way through right there on that first cut. I had to then adjust it. You saw me set it down there and readjust it. And now you'll see it cuts all the way through. So that goes through, slap through a 6x6. It is a little bit of an expensive saw. I believe it was somewhere between $800 and $900. The blade in it itself is $400 to $600. But if you do a lot of this large timber framing, doing decks, fences, stuff like that, where you cut 6x6s all the time, it definitely can be worth it. But if you're doing it just for your own home, I wouldn't advise buying such a large saw simply for the cost. Yes, it is more aggravating to have to do the multiple cuts, but it can be done. It just, when you're doing it a lot, it can be worth it. That's always the thing you're going to want to do, is figure out whether it's worth the cost of how much it costs versus the labor and added time that you have to do. So I've cut the first one to length, that first column, and then what I did is you can see I'm sticking it's a marker, and I'm pushing it through with a piece of all thread through that hole I drilled. That is simply to help anchor to the brick. It's not needed structurally, but it will help make sure the post looks really good up against the wall and doesn't end up with a gap near the top of it at all. So the next thing I do after I've gotten that through there, made sure it's dead in the right spot, I usually like to start with an extremely small bit and then work my way up slowly. So you see I went through 3 bits to get to the size I actually want. Then I pushed in a piece of all thread we had and measured about how long we needed to be able to get through the post and have room for a washer and a nut. This is it's an actual, almost like an epoxy anchoring caulking that is usually used when this all thread is going like down into a slab. Still works on the wall, but it is a little bit harder to get it to set up. That's why I had to do it multiple times, trying to pull it in, work it in there, because that stuff is extremely liquidy when it first comes out. But it sets up really fast. Like on a hot day like this, I think it took no more than 30 seconds, maybe 45 at the most, for that to fully harden. So then we just slid the post on and then knocked it into place like on a pivot. It was the easiest way to get that in there with the anchor. Next thing we did is we're looking at the drawings that we had for how the dimensions of these truss. These are some massive 22-foot large 6x6 timbers that we're building these out of. We got an angle at the bottom for the it's a reverse of a 412 pitch, because we're building a 412 pitch roof up there, and you had to do a reverse of that to get that bottom angle, and use a standard one at the top. Then we set it up there so we could get our measurements for the other piece that you see standing there just beside me right now. Tyler just had his hand on it. It's it's just to hold up the midpoint. And then we move the beam up top. We've got it marked where that's going to go, and we cut a second one. We didn't use the first one we did. We used that as a pattern, and then we also did the same thing with that other upper leg, the actual angle that comes up where the actual rafters will set. We used that one as a pattern as well. So you can see they're both still sitting down there on the sawhorses while we're putting up the other ones. We use those as patterns to make all the others. We have to modify slightly what is the leg that goes over towards the existing house where you see the OSB on the wall, because that wall is not straight with everything that is there. It's not quite level. There's also a few other things. The brick wall is actually out of square about, I think it was 2 inches. So there's some slight modifications that had to be done while we're building it, but the pattern pieces we could still use, and then we simply lopped off a little bit where we needed to. So next thing I'm doing is I'm getting the other 45 pieces for these truss, and once I get one ready, then I'll bring it down and make 2 more, so that then we have the first one I did as a pattern, and then the 2 we need to actually put up there. When I put that up, I'm using a finish nailer right there, because it shoots a very small nail, and it's basically just needs to hold it there long enough for the bracket to get in place, and the bracket will do all the work. When I nailed the other pieces, I did use a framing nailer, but I made sure all the nails were up high or where they would be hidden by the bracket, because we don't want any of those to be visible when we're done and everything is finished. So next we're just putting all the brackets, figuring out where the holes go, making adjustments as need be. All these brackets I drew up on a piece of paper and then gave to the actual customer, who had a friend who punched these out of 1/4 inch thick stainless steel. So they are extremely rugged brackets. It's actually, with them being stainless steel, they're actually tougher than the ones that you will buy from the timber shop for the brackets. Most of those are made out of a milder steel than stainless. So, but he made them all, and then he actually powder coated them himself. He owns a powder coating company, so that made that very easy for him to do at a extremely cheap cost, using 5/8 anchor carriage bolts with nuts and washers, which he also powder coated at the same time. Off to the right, there we're putting a plate that basically just helps hold it in place against that column, just in case. It shouldn't really go anywhere, especially once the walls are up, but we're doing that simply to help keep it there until the walls are there, just so we don't have to worry about it being shook off or anything. So it's a lot of up and down, simply because that's what it takes to get it in place. But I'm starting to get the next one ready. and that one, with the way the wall was, you also had the hip coming down from the other roof. I'm over there to the left. You can see I'm doing a bunch of little cutting and figuring and just making sure I get it just right. You had to cut out just enough to be able to slide the new truss in without making a weak point for the roof. So cut it in and then actually slid it right in between there, which worked out good. So we got the other column. You know, we knew how tall to make each one of these because we got our transit off the site. You can't really see it yet right now, but it's just off camera, and figured all those. We get all them cut and ready. And like I said, we already did patterns, so it makes making this next one very easy. The only thing that is different in them is simply the overall length of the lower timber. And that is simply because the wall that is over there to the left is not straight. So we pulled all our measurements from the right hand side. These beams were supposed to be 22 feet. Again, they would adjust slightly on the other end. So we simply pulled 11 feet in, and that's where we would put that middle upright piece. And then we would adjust what is on the other side to the left of that, cutting off whatever we needed to at the bottom of there to make it so that they would fit in there correctly. So it's probably can't see it, but you'll notice that the one that is over to the left right now, that leg does not come to an actual fine point, and that's because of that adjustment that we had to make. So when we do the third one, that one will be fully in line, but when our brick masons ran the brick on that side, we found out that they had done a slight little, they got out a little bit, and they have a little bit of a bulge. So we also, again, we had to adjust that beam, and we actually had to adjust in the opposite direction. But once it's all done, you'll never be able to tell. Lots of things in construction are actually have more to do with making, adjusting things to where it's not obvious to the eye. So now we're getting started on that third beam, and we're going to put up, cut the columns, get them in place, and then start working on building that truss. Again, we already have all our patterns, which in this case, we're going to actually use the patterns because this is the last one of those massive truss that we're using. So we only actually have to cut the bottom member to full length, and then we'll only need one of the I guess you could call the rafter legs, and one of the 45 supports. The other ones we already have because they would just be the patterns that we were using to make the other pieces. So I kind of messed up a little bit with the camera here. I thought it was up enough, and I do move it, I think, in a little bit, but I did not realize. I thought it would, like I said, I thought it was aimed up high and just didn't quite reach. But I mean, it's the same as the other ones that we've done that you've already seen as far as that goes. And this is the video that I guess we're going to be putting up this week. I unfortunately was not able to make it down to our investment home that I have. We've just been swamped with jobs that customers have been wanting us to do. And then there's also a few other things that have happened that have just kind of taken up a little bit of more time than was needed for what we needed. So I'm trying to just get this video out at least so that you'll have a video to watch. A lot of these things, we're actually much farther on this project here than it is showing right now, of course, but if this just allows me to be able to have content again. There was kind of a little bit of a family emergency that we had, and this just helps me be able to not have to rush to get a video done. So hope y'all enjoyed watching, and we'll see you next time.